Watching TVC Breakfast. The 2019 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index has indicated that the multidimensionally poor Nigerians increased from 86 million to 98 million between 2007 and 2017.
The report released by the United Nations Development Programme and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative noted that the proportion of people who are multidimensionally poor remained constant at just over 50% over the past decade.
Now, the report noted that even though the national average showed that 50% of Nigerians were multidimensionally poor, state and local government levels would reveal a completely different scenario. I have with me in the studio a business consultant, Vivian Ani. It's nice to have you join us right now.
Good morning, Mike. Hi.
Right. From 2007 to 2017 saw a lot of different programs by government. We remember as of 2007, 2008, the poverty alleviation program was in the works at that time. And then we also had the SURE-P, and then now we have the social intervention program like the NPA and so many other. If we have all of these things right from 2007, how did the number of multidimensional poor people increase?
Many things.
Okay.
Many things. Number one, Nigeria's population is growing at the rate of 2.8%. That's almost 3% per annum, and it means in real, in absolute terms, without even compounding. Between 2007 and 2008, if we take that number, that's 10, between 2007 and 2017, that's 10 years. Yeah. So 10 times 2.8%, you're getting 28% or almost 30%, depending on how you calculate it. So over 10 years, Nigeria's population in absolute terms has increased by 30%. And when you compound it, is a lot more. It means that even if you hold it constant, if you look at what the report said, it said that the poverty rate remains slightly above 50%. I think the precise figure was about 54%. However, the number increased by 12 million, the difference between 98 million and 86 million from 2007. Nigeria's population rate has a lot to do with it, the growth rate, because Nigeria is growing much faster than a lot of countries. If you consider the fact that some countries now have entered negative growth, meaning that population is actually declining, yet we are growing at 2.8% on the base of the last year. These are very serious numbers. So if you look against that, unless we're growing the economy itself, and not just the growth of the economy itself, but the distribution of wealth in Nigeria is able to keep up with that population growth, you're going to have deepening poverty, even in spite of those programs. Now, what should worry all of us even more is that if you look at 2007 to 2015, those were Nigerians' boom years, so to speak. GDP was growing at an average of about 6%, and yet, these poverty figures are still looking this bad.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a troubling. Now think about it. From 2015, we went into a recession sometime 2016 or so, and then since then we've not been able to grow at beyond 2%. Right? The population is growing at 2.8%. We've not been able to grow beyond 2% in the last couple of years. So the population is like that?
Is like that.
And the economy is this way?
Precisely.
Wow.
Precisely. So it's when you look at the figures and you look at what happened to Nigeria GDP-wise between 2007 and 2015, yet the figures are looking this bad.
What is really the missing link, and what are we not doing right? When you compare, when you look at India, you look at China, and you see their strategy over the past 20 years or 2-3 decades ago, they were very deliberate with their strategy, and statistics show that over about 500 million people were taken out of poverty within the space of 2 decades in China. And if you begin to look at all of these, what are we not doing right?
There are many things we're not doing right. If you look, you just mentioned a whole list of government programs aimed at alleviating poverty. I'm yet to see anywhere in the world the government has been able to alleviate poverty directly. Look at the collapse of communism. It's a failed model where government has tried directly to effect change.
To be in the lives of the people.
Precisely. It doesn't work. What government should do is to build an enabling environment. Look, Mike, if you run a business in this country, you will understand where I'm coming from. And I think the viewers, anybody who runs a business will understand where I'm coming from. If you do not build an enabling environment, no matter how much money you throw at people, it will never be able to germinate. Money is meant to enable the person grow, meaning somebody is supposed to take 1 naira and grow it. But if you give somebody 1 naira and the environment is not there, there is no way the person can grow it.
You give somebody 1 naira and the environment takes the 1 naira.
No, does not take 1 naira, it takes away 2 naira. There's a problem.
Wow. So where do we go from here now?
Unfortunately, all we've been doing is that we've just been putting small little bandages over a cancerous wound that's growing bigger and bigger every year. Look, Mike, for as long as government does not look at this issue holistically and stop using tactics rather than, looking at the whole picture, like I said, there has to be a grand plan to lift Nigerians out of poverty. Deliberate and grand. And I'm not talking about taking money and throwing in piecemeal under whatever program you call it, Sherpy, blah, blah, blah. The government has to look at the entire, each time I look at ease of doing business and I see Nigeria has moved to certain spaces, you will be impressed until you read the report itself, the reason why Nigeria has moved. And if you look at the reasons why Nigeria has moved, you really don't see how some of them, I'm not saying all of them, has translated into concrete action when you actually try to look for certain things in Nigeria. Just like try looking for government permits in Nigeria for whatever it is you're looking for, and you will understand where I'm coming from.
Wow, it's okay. Vivian Ani, thank you for giving us perspective into all of this. We look forward to greater days ahead for the Nigerian economy,
well,
certainly.
We pray.
All right. You're watching TVC Breakfast. Now, 2019 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index has indicated that multidimensionally poor Nigerians increased from 86 million to 98 million between 2007 and 2017.
The report released by the United Nations Development Programme and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative noted that the proportion of people who are multidimensionally poor remained constant at just over 50% over the past decade. The report noted that even though the national average showed that 50% of Nigerians were multidimensionally poor, state and local government levels would reveal a completely different scenario. Well, I have in the studio business consultant Vivian Ani. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. Now, between 2007 and 2017, one would refer that to the boom years, so to speak, for Nigeria.
Most of it.
Yes, but then there was an incident of recession also. But when you look at it critically, there were boom years. One would have expected that Nigerians wouldn't find themselves or having such a record at that time. Why or what didn't we do right at that time? Was it our policies? Where did we go wrong?
Yes, some of it policies, but mainly two things, population growth rate and rising inequality.
Wow.
Two things, yes. Population is growing at 2.8%. Over 10 years, it grew at 28%, if you just take it as absolute figures without compounding. And so you look at what the population was at in 2007 vis-a-vis what the population was at 2017. So if the poverty rate remained constant, right, in years that were taken as boom years, the population growth rate would not have allowed all Nigerians to feel the full impact of the very high GDP growth rates, between 2007 and 2015. Also, rising inequality, what it means is that very few Nigerians owned quite a greater percentage of the wealth. And I tell you one thing, if you have 100 naira, if for example, if we use GDP and we say GDP is 100 naira for a certain society, but one man has 99 naira, meaning everybody else has just 1 naira to share. So in Nigeria, what you have is that wealth is concentrated in very few hands. So others are sharing very little of the wealth. So if you look at those years, and that's why government came up with, government tried so many programs, but the truth of it is getting people out of poverty is something that has to be very strategic and looked at holistically.
When you say strategic and holistically, how do you mean? Because are you saying that the government alone cannot actually deal with poverty or, lift people out of poverty because it came out with policies like you rightly noted?
Definitely not. Even like China, the irony about China's case, where China is one of the biggest examples of how hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty within a very short time. China claims, I use the word claim, to be running a communist system, but in reality they're not. They're running a very market-driven system. Yes, with a lot of government planning, it's almost a market system that has a lot of government planning. So what they have done is that they've created an incredible enabling environment. It is only the Chinese that can build a road that will take Nigerians 12 years and we'll keep talking non-stop. The Chinese will build it in 1 week.
But you know, the government injects so much. I mean, 15 billion naira to drive a policy, so to speak. Should that be, you know, perhaps transferred or translated into having an enabling environment? Is that what you're trying to say?
Government is the most inefficient allocator of resources in any economy. Government all over the world, there's like I always tell people, there's nothing that's happening in Nigeria now that's not happening in other nations. Government is one of the worst creators of employment, one of the worst allocators of resources. Government has no business being in business. What government has business doing is creating an enabling environment, including the laws, including the processes through which business people register businesses, get government permits, anything that you need to do with government that will move your business forward. So government should concentrate on that and leave this business of business to the private sector.
Now, the businesses that have been left to the private sector, so for instance, when it comes to electricity, how has it fared? Okay,
fine. Now, let's look at electricity, a very, very good point. It was not left to the private sector. If you look at the agreements that ushered in privatization, it is a PPP. It's a joint venture between the government and the private sector. So it's not as if the government is completely hands off. And look, if you talk to any business person, you know, in the course of work that we do, and once you're in business with government, it changes the dynamics of the deal. Government has a totally different way of thinking that is not...
Interesting point there. Vivian, Annie, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Always my pleasure.